guys, it's Nikki here. I hope this goes smoothly because this is like the third or fourth time I've filmed this now. And I just keep forgetting to turn things on and things keep turning off and I'm ready to be done. So today I'm reviewing Jojo Rabbit, which is the movie that was based off of Caging Skies by Christine Lunens. It is a story that follows as this boy who's part of the Hitler Youth, and in the movie he has Hitler as an imaginary friend and kind of like a Jiminy Cricket conscience character. There we go. And I really didn't know what to think because that is very different from the book. But I trust Taika Waititi. However, I still set the bar low despite this trust, simply because I didn't know how this book was going to translate. The book was very dark, and the movie, not so much. So with that, I'll move into my likes and dislikes. My first like is that I really enjoyed having Hitler embodied as an imaginary friend. And I liked it because it gave you a very concrete idea of what Johannes' inner monologue was, because in the book, while it's easy to read his inner monologue as he compares himself to the standards set by the Führer, it's not something that it could be well represented the same way in the movie. And using this imaginary friend was just a really good tactic to take with that. The second like I have is the actor who played Johannes. He did a really convincing job of being like the young zealot who's been exposed to this propaganda all his life. Well, he's been at a very, very influential age. And although he wasn't as creepy as Book Johannes, I really found that the way he parroted and kind of like normalized what he was saying was just really well done by the child actor, whose name I forget even though I looked it up. My third like is how effectively they kind of showed the impact of the Third Reich of the people who were under this kind of occupation. I think they did a really good job showing while Johannes was out doing kind of some of the chores, doing deliveries, doing conscription notices while he was under the Hitler Youth. It just did a really good job of showing both how the zealots like Johannes and how some of the victims like Elsa were really impacted and how other victims outside of the Jewish population were impacted. Like people who were considered, who were political prisoners and considered treasonous. So now I'm going to move into my negatives. The first being that I didn't care for how rushed the beginning was. Although it was only the first 15 minutes, because of how rushed it was, I was worried we weren't going to get as in-depth of a look at the propaganda machine that was the Third Reich as I would have liked, and that we were going to end up dwelling on Johannes's kind of incel vibes a little bit too much. Which leads me into my second dislike, how lighthearted the movie was. It's actually something I didn't expect. Despite being told that it was lighthearted, it caught me by surprise exactly how kind of absurd it was in its lightheartedness. I think they did that just in a way to emphasize the adults in the situation and how they were acting and what it really meant, and that everything was just being filtered through Johannes' imagination is really what it felt like. So it was really interesting, but I didn't care for it, especially at the beginning of the movie. And my third negative is I wish that Johannes had aged, because even though the actor did a really good job parroting the lines of the Third Reich and the ideologies of the Third Reich, I felt like the power dynamic between Johannes and Elsa wasn't quite the same. And as such, like, it didn't hold the same impact with me, which is fine. I just didn't care for it. I'm sure there's a lot of other people who really liked how it was done here. Then with that, I'll move into characters. Elsa, she was done fine. The actress did a great idea. Little young, but good. And really that is what I can say about a lot of the characters here. They did all right. The characters were changed from the book, but they did a good job representing them. I wasn't really disappointed with any of the main actors. They did a really good job with the characters they were given, even if I didn't necessarily appreciate them the same way I appreciate the characters in the book. Like I mentioned, I wish that there had been some aging. I really wish Johannes had aged so his vitriol that he was spilling was a lot more impactful. Like, it just felt a lot more like a kid parroting an adult rather than a zealot of the Third Reich, which, while negative, allowed the movie to appeal to a much wider audience, I think. And my only other complaint is, like, they gave him a redemption arc, which makes sense in the movie, but, like, after reading the book makes me a little sad, but whatever. The movie had a different tone. It was more appropriate. And with that, I'll move into my wrap-up. As normal, I'm going to do book to movie adaptation and a movie score. Here they actually ended up being very similar. The book to movie adaptation score is a 3 out of 5. Although they changed a lot, I understand that it really was to appeal to a wider audience. If they had stayed closer to the source material, it would have been way higher rated, and a lot of people would have been way more disturbed by it. And so it was very different than the book, and so it was very different than I was expecting. And while I didn't like all of the changes, I can appreciate why they were made, and that by appealing to a wider audience, this movie is going to have a lot more staying power than the book would. Because, really, it's not the worst adaptation movie I've ever watched. There have been plenty that have been worse for way more egregious missteps. And in the long run, I did appreciate what was done, even if I didn't like it. With that, I'll move into my movie wrap-up. Again, I'm giving this a 3 out of 5. In terms of movies, it was a lot more kind of like a niche audience. Even though they do use the lightheartedness to appeal to more people, that's just appealing to more age groups, I think. I really enjoyed the use of Hitler as a physical kind of construct that you see on screen, because it made Johannes's monologue really easy to follow, and I think that was an amazing decision to make for a movie. And the pacing itself was really good, although I do complain about it being rushed in the beginning. That's just because I know that the propaganda plays a large role in why Johannes is the way he is, and that propaganda isn't necessarily explored as in depth as I would like. But they still do a pretty good job with it, and that pacing slows down a little bit, but still stays at a good meter and allows for the plot to constantly move forward without going too fast or getting stuck and dragging at certain points, which I know the book did do occasionally. And honestly, the lightheartedness and humor in this really probably will appeal to you more if you have not read the book and weren't expecting something that's as dark as the book. Overall, it was a pretty good movie. There was some really good cinematography. I mean, some of the dialogue was pretty terrible, but that's what you get sometimes when you translate a book into a screenplay. It's just how it goes. And yeah, it really wasn't that bad. And with that, I will leave you here. I won't rant too much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.